Okay, we're live. Welcome, everybody, all you listeners, to the first episode of the Mythos and Milk podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and my co host is with me as well. Baby, please say your name.
I'm Kiara.
Yes, she thinks that's her name. She had to think about it for a
I think,
second. That's okay, though.
yeah.
All right, and so today, for the first episode, for the first podcast, we're going to be talking about the Tower of Babel, Nimrod, and all conspiracies linked to that. And at the end, we'll discuss, is Nimrod actually Hercules? But we'll get to that at the end. And so, to start us off, we're going to... How should we start this off?
Let's start it off with talking about the origins of the Tower of Babel in the Bible. What did it talks about specifically?
Okay, so we'll start with Genesis 11 here then. Okay, starting at verse 1. It says, "Now the whole world had one language and one common speech. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, 'Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly.' They used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. Then they said, 'Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth.'" Which is interesting, by the way, and we'll come back to that. "But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower that the people were building. And the Lord said, 'If as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language, so they will not understand each other.' So the Lord scattered them from there over the entire earth, and they stopped building the city. This is why it was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there the Lord scattered them over the face of the earth." Okay. Where does it
Very
talk about
interesting.
Nimrod? Anyways, we'll get to Nimrod later. But so what are your thoughts? What are your first initial thoughts, just the plain reading without really even getting into it?
Well, the first thing that grabbed my attention about that was firstly, I was interested as to why they were building that tower. Um, the more I looked into it, the more I just realized that it was because they wanted to reach heaven without dying. Um, they wanted to reach God's level. They were sort of like, I'm not really too sure exactly. Maybe. I'm sorry.
Not
I
too sure
can't.
of what.
I'm not too sure as to why, like specifically why they were trying to do that. Like I don't know if it was out of a mockery or if it was out of um like them just really being curious as to what's up there, way up there. And I think in someone mentioned something about how the top of the building, they were planning to build a sword cutting through the heavens, almost like telling God, "Come to us," and like you know how what is that called? Not mockery, but it's like when someone kind of challenges you to a duel or something like that.
Hmm.
It's like trying to put themselves at that same position. And God might have seen that as a possibility. They were getting too close up there and ended up dispersing everything and making everyone confused and things like that. But I mean, there's two ways to look at it. There's this way that's like God didn't want them to reach him or to reach the heavens, even slightly, or even give them the thought that they might, or the notion that they might reach to heaven, or that God wanted them to disperse through the different lands and create different nations. So, um, it'd just be a lot more diverse. But what do you think?
Well, I think so. They specifically, I don't think they're. I don't think God's worried about them like reaching heaven or something and banging on the gates of heaven. Like I don't think that's what he was concerned about. I think the whole idea here is that man was prideful and he was trying to, just like the garden, like you were talking about earlier, before we started recording, is this was another attempt at man usurping God, bypassing God in the natural nature, essentially, with how we are supposed to be uh, in synergy with God and His will, and we're constantly trying to usurp that, because they say, "Build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves." If you know anything about the Bible, names are very important. Um,
Mm-hmm.
right, God gives people names based on their uh, their future, their greatness, etc. Adam was given the uh, ability or authority by God to name the animals. So, like, giving names is a very important thing when you look at the biblical context. And so, it's a way of saying that they are trying to, again, bypass God and do something out of pure, sheer ignorance and pride.
Mm.
And then they also
I also,
realize, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Well, I was gonna say, I thought it was interesting how what God's response was to it. It was sort of unusual because usually, like, you see God send when humanity or people are creating or committing a bunch of sin, different sins. God would usually kill them through certain different like plagues or floods and all this stuff. But in this scenario, He just destroys their tower and disperses them into complete confusion where they don't understand each other. I think that was very benign compared to His other ways of destroying like, groups of people. Yeah, I wonder why that was.
And it's weird that they somehow understood that they would be scattered over the face of the earth. So I don't know if that
Yeah.
was some sort of preconceived notion they already had.
Mm,
Maybe that had happened before or something. But they
yeah.
knew, otherwise we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth. How did you guys know
Right.
that? I don't really have any theories, to be honest, other than maybe there was some prophets or something that foretold that would happen, because we know there are constantly prophets before
Mm,
Christ that are always coming to the people, telling them to repent and telling them
mm,
that the judgment of God is coming, and usually they'll tell them what that will be. I guess that's my only
mm,
theory on that. Okay. Come, let us go and confuse their languages. So that's important,
mm,
right? Because the whole idea is that if, as one people speaking the same language, they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. That's always shocked me. That's
mm,
always been a sort of jarring statement by God Himself. What does that mean? Nothing they plan to do will be impossible to them. What does that mean? Does that mean
mm.
literally we can do anything? Um, I don't know. Can we literally storm the gates of heaven? I don't think so, but it's a very interesting phraseology, and I think it's not meant to be taken literally, because obviously we can't do anything. Um, for example, we can't, even if we all got together, we couldn't somehow live forever, right, or something like that. But it
Mhm.
is very strong language, implying that at the very least we could do a lot of things, and um, not rival God, obviously, but in some
Mm.
sense be like a complete nuisance to his will and his plan, and just I don't know. It's very strong language used. Again, I don't think it's literal, but it's very interesting as
You
to
don't think
why.
it's an actual building? Did you think it was an actual building, or what do you think about that?
The
It was a
tower?
more figurative thing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's pretty decent evidence in the Middle East, like Iraq, I think, specifically. There's some towers. And so I have a theory about this, actually. I'll bring this up now. So, one of my
Mm-hmm.
theories for why you have sort of pyramid slash ziggurat like structures kind of all over the world, right? You have it in Latin America, you have it in Africa, the Middle East, even in Asia and Europe and North America. Like pretty much every continent, there's a kind of pyramid or ziggurat, a similar structure that's pointed upwards, right? These massive buildings that have a
Mm-hmm.
similar layout. And one of my theories is that I do think the Tower of Babel was real, obviously, a real tower. And I believe that it's possible that when God scattered everybody across the whole world, and then you have the nations, the tribes of different people, sort of becoming a thing, they had in their collective conscience, they had some sort of memory, a collective memory of the Tower of Babel that was handed down as maybe a tradition or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's possible that they were trying to rebuild the Tower of Babel in their own little areas because they knew this is what their fathers were doing that got interrupted. And maybe they don't know exactly why it was interrupted, what exactly
Mm-hmm.
happened, but they knew that their forefathers were building this. And so it was sort of in their psyche to try to do the same thing.
Mm. Okay.
I would
Um,
say it's either that or like Nephilim giants. It's one of those two.
really?
Definitely, yeah.
Well, it was interesting. They were talking about how the bricks were laid. Most likely, they were like huge bricks, and they were kind of confused on how these little humans were creating that specific tower. But I really didn't look into if there's anything left, like if there are any remains today or not. But
Yeah, if you're listening to this, go look up after you're done listening to this. But go ahead and look up ziggurats in Iraq, I believe, is where the main one is. And you'll see this huge, it's allegedly the Tower of Babel itself. I'm not sure. I tend to lean towards it might be. Um,
mm-hmm.
but again, I don't think these towers were literally made for reaching, the gates of heaven and them becoming like God in terms of like power or something. If anything, it was probably more along the lines of something like a focal point to where their demonic, twisted worship of the fallen angels could take place. Maybe I've even heard some people say something along, and this would kind of go more in line with like the whole Nephilim giant theory, is
Mm-hmm.
that they would build these structures, and at the top of the structures there would be, because they were like these you know energy buildings essentially, like with the whole free energy thing and whatnot, they would conjure spirits, and it would basically be a portal from our world and the spirit world, the ether. And so you could have the fallen angels traveling back and forth or something. I don't know exactly, but it would be something along the lines of that. It was more of a focal point for spiritual interaction with evil demonic spirits rather than just like a literal, like, we're going to build a tower and go to heaven.
Well, I I did want to ask you about purpose, because we kind of touched upon like why God would do that to them. And um I know that some people would say that it was less of a punishment, um and more of like this forced correction into having them do what they were called to do, which is to be fruitful and multiply, to fill the earth as God commanded. I was
Right.
wondering what your thought on that
Like you're
was.
saying, they were kind of disobeying God by not doing that, and they were
Yeah.
collectivizing when they're supposed to
Hmm.
be subduing the whole earth. Yeah, I think there might be some merit to that idea. Um, like part and parcel of their rebellion and the whole idea of this great city and this great tower was that they were sort of forerunners of Antichrist, you could say, in terms of bringing everybody together and
Hmm.
one language, one way of living, etc.
Yeah.
When God's intent was for them to be everywhere, and so He
Hmm.
crushed their Antichrist. Obviously, the precursor, not the final, but the precursor to the Antichrist plans, and then ultimately his will for humanity was fulfilled in that. So you still using their disobedience for
Hmm.
his own purpose.
Right.
Yeah, I definitely think there's something to that.
Okay, so um about the ziggurat, I read something about Alexander the Great wanting to, or apparently considering rebuilding the ziggurat in Iraq, I think. Um, and I just looked into it, and it says that it's just a low mound and water filled sort of pit. There's really nothing there anymore. But um, I thought that was interesting that Alexander the Great is kind of intertwined with the story as well, um, in some way. But I wanted to talk to you about Nimrod because I think he's a pretty fascinating character. If you want to start getting into that.
Do you do you know how Nimrod is connected to the Tower of Babel?
No, tell us.
So, allegedly, in my opinion, um, let me just I'm gonna read through this real quick, just so you can get like an outline, and we can go into it. So, Nimrod is mentioned in Genesis 10 briefly, and he's referred to as a mighty hunter before the Lord, whose kingdom began at Babel. So, just to be clear, a mighty hunter before the Lord, a lot of people might think of like a real hunter, like, oh, he was actually good at hunting. Um, but the majority of people who look into this text and understand Hebrew and understand the broader biblical context of the early chapters of Genesis will actually say that a mighty hunter before the Lord is not a good thing. Like, it's not like, oh, he was, God praised him for being a good hunter, whatever. It
Mm,
actually implies something akin to, or closer to at least, that he was a hunter of men and who was possibly one of these Nephilim uh, figures who were, from an offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of man, who was actually a hunter of men. And so when it says he was a
mm,
mighty hunter before the Lord, what they're really talking about is that he was like a cannibal and he would hunt men and eat men, because that's a huge theme with the biblical
mm,
giants and the uh, Nephilim as a whole, is that they were cannibals and they would eat people. Um, and so, anyway, so his kingdom began at Babel, and he's cast as the first post flood rebel king who deliberately defied God by organizing humanity into a single empire and building the tower. There's claims that he vowed to reach heaven to fight God or to prevent another flood, which the Bible doesn't talk about that. I think
mhm,
probably what we already established is closer It's more of a conservative view. This is more bombastic, you could say. But I
Okay.
wouldn't rule it out completely. Like, I think this is at least possible or plausible, that
Mm.
he would have wanted to fight God. Because we know
Mm.
creatures are stupid. Um,
Mhm.
so he established a tyranny to turn people from God and created the first one world government, right? So this is where I was talking about sort of the Antichrist system. Well, he would have been seen as sort of the first Antichrist figure, bringing the system together. He was sort of the first like global tyrant.
Mm.
So it makes him a direct prototype of the end times Antichrist, who will recreate a very similar system. And now you have modern globalism, right? The UN, um, English as the sort of unifying language and the unity rhetoric that we always
Mhm.
hear. It's sort of harkening back to the unfinished project of Babel. Um,
Mhm.
and so that's sort of who Nimrod is. That's sort of the overarching. There are some other theories like, is Nimrod Gilgamesh, which I think so personally. I think that if you read the Epic of Gilgamesh, it's pretty identical to, for example, Noah's flood, and then
Yeah.
he would have founded, because Gilgamesh was Sumerian. The Sumerians are the ones that wrote about Gilgamesh, had Gilgamesh as a figure, and he's depicted as a giant, by the way. There's
Mm.
depictions of Gilgamesh, aka Nimrod, who holding like lions, like holding two lions in each of his hands. So he was sort of depicted as this giant figure. Um, yeah. Anyways, I don't
I
want to
know that
yap too much.
there's. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
There's other. I think people were talking about how another theory behind him was that he was also Sargon of Akkad, which found one of the world's first empires, I think, in 2300 BC. Um,
Please get into
and
that. I have
then,
no idea who that is. It sounds very interesting.
uh, well, is a Mesopotamian like god king, um, like
Mm.
this warrior hunter deity, which lines up with the warrior or the mighty hunter title that Nimrod has, suspiciously close to that. So I guess some scholars say that Nimrod might not even be one person. It's like a composite or something like a folk memory that fuse several different characters or people in history um, into this single biblical figure.
Well, it's certainly possible. I mean, as Christians, we believe the scriptures are truth. Uh,
Mhm.
you know, inspired by God, and so there definitely was a figure called Nimrod. Now, I think one of the better theories, sort of going off of what you were saying, would be something like, well, what was that guy's name? Of Akaz or whatever?
Sargon of Akkad, yeah.
Akkad, yeah. So that he and Gilgamesh, and later we'll get into Hercules, which I think is the most fascinating one. These figures are other people's memories and traditions of Nimrod himself, right? Because if
Mm.
Nimrod was the sort of the first global king, the first global emperor before the Great Dispersion, the Great Diaspora of peoples, every single, and this kind of goes along with my theory as well, with it was in their memory to build the Tower of
Mm.
Babel, and so they were erecting similar structures. They would have that same sort of tradition or memory of this figure Nimrod that would have maybe been passed down in stories, and obviously stories can get corrupted and mythologized more than they were.
Mm.
So I
Okay.
think I think that's very possible.
Yeah. Well, regarding Sargon of Akkad,
Yeah.
I think his story is pretty well. It is close to the Moses story because, well, he first of all he was a very influential ruler in the ancient world. he created the Akkadian Empire, which is which was the world's first large, like, multi-ethnic empire. And like, his origin story was being placed in a basket and then set to float on a river as an infant, where he was rescued by some family and eventually he rose to power.
Really?
Yeah, so it's always very strange to me how some of these stories align with each other that are biblical, and I'm not sure why, but like, if there's a rhyme or reason for that.
Well, I just think
Yeah,
it
I just want.
speaks to, like, it just shows us that there is, like, this, there is legitimacy to what we're reading in the scriptures. Like, it's not just hoopla. Like,
Mm-hmm.
other people are
Exactly.
talking about it. It's, in the folks' memory, in some sense,
Yeah.
the folks' tradition. So I think it just kind of gives credence to that. Now you'll have people argue, their own opinions and worldviews on why that might be the case or why, and whatever. But we don't have to get into that, obviously.
Um, One of the more woo-woo type of explanations for the Tower of Babel.
Babel.
Sorry, I've heard some people say Babel for some reason, but
Some people are
they
retarded.
say
The people are
they say
retarded.
the tower itself was used as, like, ancient technology, or
True.
like this ancient astronaut sort of thing.
Okay, you lost me. But
Um,
astronaut. Because space
kind
isn't
of.
real.
Yeah, they're just saying, things like, oh, it was a portal. They were trying to get to this new portal, and they were shut down because of that, because no one can reach that except the angels and God. And they were kind of making it seem like God was a little bit afraid because it was getting too real, and so he was like, "No, you
That's
can't come
crazy.
up here. Um, you gotta go somewhere else." And that's, I don't know. I think that's one of the fun things about some Bible stories, is that there's so many different speculations and theories and stuff that you can just read on, but ultimately you kind of just have to depend what's in the Bible and what your church teaches you, or like the Orthodox Church. But it's fun to look into it.
Now,
Sure.
I'm going to read this to you because this is my favorite theory personally. Okay, this and everything that goes with this is my personal favorite. I also think it probably has the most credence. We'll get into different things, but so drawing on ancient astronaut ideas. I hate the word astronaut, but whatever. Babelu is reread not as a confusion, but as gate of the gods. The tower and other ziggurats or pyramids were advanced technologies, energy, and line machinery or portals to contact or summon pre-flood quote gods, which are, the fallen angels, the Anunnaki, according to the Sumerians. And Nimrod is the Antichrist archetype, like we talked about, who revived the pre-flood religion. And that's the other thing we'll get into. We'll get into definitely in another episode. We can maybe touch on it here. The whole idea of reviving old religions, because this is, history is cyclical in a way. And so you have periods of the correct worship of God, and then you have falling into degeneracy and darkness, and then you have the revamping of God's kingdom, and then you have people falling away, remembering the old religions and going back to it and repackaging it in their own modern way. Modern, not as in our modern necessarily, but in context, they're modern, whatever that would be. And you see that. Let me read this real quick. So the flood religion and tech only a century after the flood is wiped out the language confusion was God's intervention to stop interdimensional access. This blends with the Stitch and style narratives of the extraterrestrial genetic engineering and lost high technology. Obviously, extraterrestrials don't exist. But what I was gonna say
Mhm.
about the last thing I was gonna say about the reviving the old religions, just like Nimrod would have
Mhm.
probably done with the other pre-flood religion. My cat is like laughing in the background. That's crazy.
What?
She's autistic. It's okay.
So Alex's cat is possessed.
So another interesting tidbit of this is that the the archaeological site that was dug up, I think less than a century ago, maybe right around a century ago, which was God, what's it called? It's the oldest archaeological discovery made. What's the freaking name?
No idea.
Oldest. I gotta look this up. Oldest human archaeological structure found. Um, it's got a
By the way,
very
I only had a few hours to prepare for this, so if I sound retarded, it's because of.
Gobekli Tepe. Okay, so Gobekli Tepe. I can never say it properly. Um, but essentially, this is a bunch of. You can look it up for yourself. Gobekli Tepe. Göbekli
Mhm.
Tepe. It's in Turkey, I believe, or some area close to Turkey. And it's these essentially these like huge like structures with a ton of like animal carvings, like somebody was communicating with somebody else, um,
Mhm.
telling a story almost. And there's like astrological signs and symbols all over it as well. All the usual stuff. And
Mhm.
what's interesting about it is the theory is that Göbekli Tepe was some sort of either a warning, pre-flood warning of what was to come, or possibly some survivors after made that to warn people not to do the same things that got them the flood. Um, but the interesting thing is that the companies, the NGOs that bought the Göbekli Tepe site are a branch of the what's it called? Klaus Schwab. What's his whole thing? Klaus Schwab. What?
Um, the World Economic
Yes,
thing.
it's a branch. It's
Okay.
an NGO of the World Economic Forum.
Yeah.
Um, and talk about reviving old religions, old satanic religions.
Exactly.
But anyway, so
Mhm.
we could probably do a whole podcast on that itself and those themes. But
I want
back.
to know what you think of that. Of the like, some people use this story in particular, the Tower of Babel, because of Babel. I keep. Oh, I'm so sorry. Because they think it was a punishment, and they think that diversity is a punishment from God. That He did that because they were trying to, like we talked before, like trying to be like God or get up to the level of where God was or something like that. And as punishment, He just made them speak different languages and, force them into creating different nations. Would you say that that sounds more like a punishment than like a correction into what you're supposed to be doing,
Well, I think it's a
which was.
combination. Just depends on how you're
Mm,
looking at it. Like to those people, it would have been seen as a punishment.
mhm.
Absolutely. But
Okay.
in and of itself, I wouldn't say so. No, I think again, God's plan was always for humanity to subdue the earth, and the
Hmm.
ethnicities are a result of that, of different people going through micro evolutions in their environment,
Okay.
resulting in the various ethnicities. In my
Yeah.
humble opinion, I don't know, obviously for sure. Sargon,
Well,
Sargon
huh?
is Nimrod apparently.
Are you just figuring this learning this new thing?
Yeah.
Sargon of Akkad.
Yeah. Okay. So
And
another thing that people need to look up if you're watching this. So look up the ziggurat in Iraq, but also look up. Oh, and you can do your own research. Look the ziggurat in Iraq. Look up the pyramids in Mesoamerica, Latin America. Look up the pyramids in Asia. Look up the pyramids that are underwater off the coast of Japan. Obviously, you probably know what the pyramids in Egypt look like. The pyramids in Europe, look
mm-hmm,
at those. There's pyramids
mm-hmm,
everywhere. And I'm telling you, the theory that they had some sort of blood memory or some sort of tradition that remembered the Tower of Babel and they were trying to rebuild it to do their own thing on a smaller scale, I
yeah.
think makes, at the very least, it makes some sense. Um, Otherwise, you just have people building the exact same thing all across the world without ever communicating with each other for no reason, and that makes even less sense. So, and then
Well,
the
there's okay.
listen, the UN. Last thing here, the UN. Look
Mm-hmm,
up the UN building in New York. It looks like there's a painting. So the what's it called? The Louis Weiss building.
mm-hmm,
Oh, I'm sorry. It's not the UN. It's the European Parliament. It's in
okay.
Strasbourg. Um, so there's a painting by Peter Bruegel,
Mm-hmm,
uh, and he has a painting from 1563 called the Tower of Babel. And look up that picture, the painting of the Tower of Babel, and then look up the European Parliament building in
okay.
Strasbourg. Identical, like they obviously did that on purpose.
Mhm. Yeah, they did. Definitely. Wow.
Which makes sense because it's going to come from Europe. Like,
Yeah.
only the Europeans uh, would do such a stupid thing. No, I'm kidding. But it's true.
Well, the ziggurat, the purpose of the ziggurat or ziggurat, was to kind of function for different societies that would build them, was like a ceremonial or religious thing to connect heaven and earth, kind of have like this stairway to God or bringing the gods closer to humanity. Um, is interesting because I think that's always been like a theme throughout human history is people doing similar things to like kind of reaching heaven or reaching the divine or the sacred without actually dying. Um, I don't know why that was like a bit impactful for me, but most of the times they were destroyed by kings or whatever deity that didn't want them to reach them. So this isn't. It's again, it's a reoccurring theme over and over again of like this warning against hubris and wanting to be more than you are, wanting to be something divine, when you're just a human.
Well, it's not even, and I would say it's not even about wanting to be something divine. I think that's, in some sense, innate to human nature itself, because we
Mm-hmm.
are supposed to be partakers of the divine, right? Like we are supposed to be
Yep.
deified, um, but it's through the grace of God. It's through Jesus Christ. It's not through our own means. That's where it gets problematic, is when you try to bypass God and
Mm-hmm.
try to do that yourself, become divine, deify yourself through your own means, your own work, your own whatever, 12 trials or whatever Heracles had to go through um,
Mm-hmm.
to be deified. But no, it's through the grace of Christ that you're deified, partaking in the divine energies of God. And
Right.
so it is natural, and that's why one way or another you're going to pursue that, whether it's being a Christian or whether it's doing something else. Um, and being, I
True.
mean, even
Right.
Muslims, like Muslims, for example, it's just popped in my head. It's not for any particular reason, but Muslims, they do all of these things, right? All of these works. I'm not saying works are bad, obviously, but I'm just describing it. Like they do all these works And those works are what get them to heaven where they are quote unquote deified. Now, I don't think their religion's coherent enough to have an actual doctrine on what happens, like why are all men resurrected? Why is like they don't have a coherent view of like the fall of man, of nature, of essence, of partaking of grace, etc. Like their religion
Mhm.
is just not that advanced, I think. But irregardless, they do in some sense have at least a conception of like, oh, being in heaven and being perfect. They might not exactly be able to explain that as well as a Christian could, for example,
Mhm.
but they are sort of an example of trying to do those things on your own and you getting there via your own merits. Um,
Mm. Yeah.
so
Yeah, absolutely.
it's just anybody who's not a Christian, in my opinion.
Hmm. You know how the Quran has all the stories of Genesis,
We're
I would
getting into
say.
Islam now. Go
Well, I just wanted to say something
ahead,
really
yeah, yeah,
quick.
of course.
The Quran doesn't have the story of Babel and the Tower of Babel in it, but it has something parallel to it. It's kind of like
Shocker.
yeah, but it's relocated to Egypt in like a different era. And it's about Pharaoh mocking Moses and his claim of the one true God and his orders.
Tawheed.
Um, and so Pharaoh orders his people to build a tower so he can climb up to the God of Moses and see for himself, implying that he thinks Moses is lying. And then God then destroys the Pharaoh's plan and schemes. Um,
Mmm.
so I don't know why. Well, they coincide because it's God being angry at towers and destroying them. But yeah,
Well, that
this is pretty.
unironically sounds like something Pharaoh would do. So
It
I'll give him
does, yeah,
credit. It's not like totally ludicrous.
yeah. But um, I guess what was weird was that they just completely changed the story, like
Oh,
into the
100%.
pharaohs.
Yeah, they love doing that.
Yeah, yeah. This is a very interesting topic that I kind of went down on a rabbit hole today a little bit.
Good.
Um,
We love it. I'm sure the people are super happy.
oh yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, definitely. We'll get into more interesting topics and theories and plan things out better, maybe. Myself
Oh, of
more than Alex.
course.
You're smarter than me.
That's true. I'll
But
never forget that. I do want to. I'll just go through this and we can sort of stop and end it here. But I
Mhm,
do want to compare Nimrod and who I believe is Gilgamesh.
mhm,
Um, compare him to Heracles, the Greek hero, because obviously I love Greek mythology and stuff. Um,
mhm,
but it's very interesting the similarities rather that are between the two and they're shared between the two. So I'll just read through this real quick. So Nimrod and Heracles are sometimes linked in older comparative mythologies, folklores, and especially in 19th century works like Alexander Hislop's The Two Babylons, which I believe is where the main theory comes from. Like, probably, I don't know that before him this was really talked about or even existed. I mean, I'm sure some people thought of it, like they had to have. But these connections were largely based on shared heroic archetypes. Mainstream scholarship, which, you know, iffy, they certainly have an
mhm,
agenda that they would like to push and make sure that the quote unquote evidence lines up with that. But mainstream scholarship more commonly associates Nimrod with Mesopotamian figures such as the god Ninturra, who was the warrior hunter. Gilgamesh, Sargon of Akkad, which we just heard that, and Imerarch. Okay, interesting name. While Heracles is frequently synchronized with Niruta or similar Near Eastern heroes. But again, it's kind of irrelevant because we're assuming that the Greeks, for example, had this tradition somewhere in their lineage that their forefathers would tell them about, that they got from their forefathers and so on. So here's some shared heroic and hunter archetypes between the two. So both are portrayed as exceptionally powerful and mighty figures. Nimrod is explicitly called Gibor, or the mighty one or hero, and the prototypical hunter whose fame became proverbial, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. Heracles, the ultimate Greek hero, has superhuman strength, and he is obviously known for killing, or you could say even hunting, the she bear or the she wolf, I believe, is Cerberus as well, the dog of Hades. I believe that was during his 12 trials. So both are celebrated for their prowess against wild beasts. Exactly. Nimrod's hunting reputation. Heracles' 12 labors include multiple animal slaying feats. The Nemean lion, that's what I was thinking of. The Nemean lion. It wasn't the she wolf. The she wolf is something completely different.
Yeah.
Or the she bear.
Content.
Whatever it was, she bear, whatever. The Arimathian boar, the Cretan bull, some birds, Cerberus. They both display physical power as a defining trait. Some traditionally amplify Nimrod into a near giant or supernatural strongman, especially the extra biblical lore, which is fine, obviously, if it's historically reliable. But that's what I was talking about with, I believe, either Babylon or Sumeria. I don't think it was Mesopotamia, but they depict this Nimrod, this Gilgamesh figure, as literally a giant. So the weapons that were associated, Heracles is famously linked with a club and sometimes a bow. Older comparative notes sometimes connect Heracles' club to the constellation Orion, with whom Nimrod was identified in some ancient traditions, such as Persian or Jewish sources that place Nimrod among the stars as Orion, which is interesting. So you have this sort of astrological
Mm-hmm.
connection between the
There's
two
always astrological
every
stuff
single
behind these.
time.
Yeah.
Well.
Well,
Nimrod is
exactly.
depicted as the first post-flood emperor. We talked about that. Finding Babylon, Uruk, Akkad, cities in Assyria, including Nineveh as well, which is where Sam Shamoon is from, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, the Assyrians. Heracles, while primarily a hero of labors and adventures, appears in some local Greek and Mediterranean traditions as a cultural hero, a city founder, or protector who established order through strength. That's
Mm.
that's based and amazing. So in Hislop's framework, who's an influential in certain Protestant and conspiracy circles, Nimrod was the original human who was deified after a violent death and then reappeared under many pagan names across cultures, including forms that overlapped with Heracles as one manifestation of the mighty child or the hero god in the Babylonian mystery system. Which, they did come before the Greeks, so it's possible, right?
Mhm.
So both figures were absorbed into broader Mediterranean Near Eastern religious syncretisms. Heracles was equated with various Eastern warrior gods, including Ninurta. And since Nimrod is frequently linked by scholars and traditionalists to Ninurta, um, an indirect chain forms. Nimrod loosely equals Nurta, Nurta loosely equals Heracles. So there's that connection.
Mm.
Um, so there is no ancient text that directly equates the two figures as the same person. Scholarly census treats them as independent cultural products. But again, we're not, when you look at it from a secular scholarly vantage point, of course it's not going to make any sense. But when you look at it from a more biblical framework, it's very easy
Mhm.
to say, hey, this guy Nimrod, he was this person who did this and this, had these attributes and uh, what is it called, uh, archetypes about him. Sorry, I blanked. And then, centuries later, you have other people, again, from the diaspora who remember this canon event in human history. And so they start writing their own mythologies, putting in their own ethnic twists into the stories to create their own
Mhm.
narratives. Um, but, anyways, that's always the most fascinating one, is Heracles being Nimrod. There's another more schizophrenic one, which is that Hercules, not
Mhm.
Hercules, sorry. Uh, Samson is
Mhm.
Hercules. Samson is Hercules, which is an interesting one. That's a little too schizophrenic for me, though. I don't really buy it.
Yeah,
But some people
that's
do
a bit
believe
out
that.
there.
Investigate Gilgamesh. But, anyways, so that's that for, I think. Do you have any last thoughts?
Sapphic Night. No, not really. I think that we
You
covered
think that was
everything
good?
we needed to cover as far as that. There's not too much that
Good first
goes on.
podcast. Really choppy, really,
Really
really,
terrible. Sorry.
really mid in terms of a podcast. But hey, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah, this is a more of a practice run for sure for us. Me especially, I've never really talked on a podcast like this. So a little nervous. I think we did okay
You never
our
want to tell
first
the
time.
people you're nervous. I'm
It's
joking.
alright.
I'm joking. I'm kidding. Giving you a hard time. All right. Well, we appreciate you guys listening. Like, share, comment if you guys have any ideas about what we said, any of your own sort of out there schizophrenic conspiracy theories. We would love to hear it. Um,
Yes, definitely.
but yeah, I think that's it. And we will see you guys in the next one.
Bye.